It's been a long time coming. The Overwatch World Cup is finally returning to BlizzCon. Some of the most legendary matches in the history of the esport have taken place on this stage. Some of you may have only gotten into Overwatch esports recently, so you may not totally understand what's going on, or just how exciting this is. If you fall into that space, or you're looking for a preview, analysis, and simple understanding of this year's World Cup, you've come to the right place. Here is a fan's guide to the 2023 Overwatch World Cup group stage and finals. Let's begin with some basic info like start date and where to watch. To begin with, the World Cup group stage matches will run from October 29th through November 1st. 8 teams across 4 groups will compete to go into a single elimination 8-team bracket with the winner taking home the gold. Afterwards, that final with those 8 teams will go from November 3rd through November 4th. All games will be held on LAN at BlizzCon in the Anaheim Convention Center. So yes, all 16 countries will be playing against one another face-to-face on the big stage. Please note though, there's only going to be a live audience in the final 8. The schedule can be found, or will eventually be found, on the Overwatch World Cup website. If you're wondering where you can watch the World Cup, you have a lot of options. A, you could watch it on the Play Overwatch or Overwatch Contenders YouTube and or Twitch channels. Alternatively, all of your favorite creators on any platform are allowed to host watch parties of all of the games. People such as J3, Flats, and ML7 did it just for the qualifiers before, and it was a hit. Or of course, if you want to support your boy, I'll be live on my channel for both days of the finals. In terms of skins, incentives, and rewards, I don't really know if Blizzard's giving out free Twitch drops like they did for qualifiers, so keep an eye on that just in case it does happen. They haven't announced anything official yet though. However, you still could get your hands on some cool World Cup gear. There's a couple of bundles that are being offered that can get you a Sojourn and or Lucio skin plus some other goodies. It may seem a little pricey, which is very understandable, but you have to remember that these skins will go a long way as this year's World Cup prize pool is being crowdfunded. About 25% of all World Cup purchases are going directly towards what the players can earn. Blizzard is very greedy, yes, but think about the players here. If you want to help them earn as much money as humanly possible in a dying esport, here's your way of helping. With that out of the way, let's look into the tournament format itself. As mentioned previously, the first thing to get through is the round of 16 group stage. 16 countries made it through a 40-country gauntlet, and said countries are being split into 4 groups, and those groups consist of the following. Group A will be Korea, Colombia, Mexico, and Finland. Group B consists of Great Britain, Australia, Brazil, and Canada. Group C is China, Spain, Hong Kong, and Thailand. And finally in Group D, we've got a stacked roster of the United States, Saudi Arabia, France, and Japan. That last group is going to be very interesting. In case you were wondering about fairness, these groups were selected at random, so sorry in advance to any of the countries who were victims of bad RNG. 2 teams from all 4 of these groups are going to advance from the round-robin group stage to a single elimination 8-team final to decide the gold, silver, and bronze medals. That pretty much takes care of all of the basic information and format stuff you need to know. It's a lot simpler compared to the qualifier. So how about we move a bit deeper into the groups and take a look at what teams are in contention. And the first one we're going to talk about is Group D, as that's the one a lot of people have their eye on. It is very loaded. And I'd say the worst team is probably Japan, and they're full of Pacific Contenders players. It's a decent team. And even then, they still might have a shot despite being the underdogs. There's a possibility that any one of these countries could fold under the pressure. The favorite, though, is going to be the United States. They have a tendency to get knocked out early in the World Cup, and everybody's usually preying on their downfall, but that's not at least until like the round of 8 for the most part. The United States is just chock full of former and current Overwatch League players. They're a bit too loaded to get knocked out this early. Their DPS line could be one of the best in the entire World Cup, as Hydron and Sugarfree are both dangerous Overwatch League playmakers. More than anything, though, I think we'll be looking closely at the backline the most. Ultraviolet and RuPaul are two of the best Western supports in the game, but unfortunately, they both play flex support. As the competition gets tougher, you have to ask yourself if having one of them flex over to main support will eventually be a problem. Generally though, the US are really good, and they do have an interesting flex option in Dante for extra backup. I think that here in the groups, it's probably still worth feeling pretty confident in them. Okay, but what about the other guys? Well, they're all good in their respective rights. Like I said before, Japan will be seen as an underdog, but outside of their match with Korea, they looked quite impressive in their qualifiers. Their entire roster is the recent second place finisher of the most recent October Pacific Asia contender season. This team is seriously good, and their synergy is not to be underestimated. But if they want to get there, they'll have to topple the likes of France and Saudi Arabia. France have a long-established history of good Overwatch World Cup results, and this year could be no different. Led by an arsenal of veterans and new talent eager to prove themselves, France have a real shot. Their front line of Ben Best and Poco gives them a good balance on what they can run from the tank department. Another guy to keep your eye on is FD God. The World Cup is where this guy first made a name for himself, and I'm sure he's hungry to prove himself after getting kicked off the Justice. And I'd say that his teammates, Pac and Avo, could also do something similar, as they both had their moments in the qualifiers and are not to be trifled with. However, France could be in a tough spot. Their head coach Get Amazed has stepped down for some recent drama surrounding him, and former flex support Reviews has been suspended from competitive play. Both these things could affect their potential and mindset, so try and keep that in mind in terms of France's overall potential, but generally they still are very capable, and they have a good track record when it comes to success, and that could be invaluable. Now, if France are the established veterans of this group, Saudi Arabia are the up-and-comers. Saudi Arabian Overwatch has arrived. It's been growing like crazy, and its true potential has finally bubbled to the surface. The result is a super tricky playstyle with boatloads of talent and great minds behind the scenes. This year's flex support for Toronto Defiant, Sir Majed, is eager to get back on stage and continue his dominance. And joining him is the always reliable KSA, one of the most underrated tank players in the game. He's been a notable frontline presence for years and has been a leader in EU contenders. And with the wide array of heroes that he can play at an elite level, Saudi Arabia are a tough shell to crack. But where you honestly might be the most afraid is the damage line. Yes, Blizzard forced the world-famous Yazan to step away from competition thanks to recent controversy, but that doesn't mean the DPS line isn't dangerous. Quartz is one of the most exciting non-Eastern prospects out there, and while Yubi may not be as popular as Yazan, his skill set and resume are very impressive. He can also play a good Pharah and Echo, so that strategy can still be integral to their success, but on top of it, his hero coverage is fairly wide. He's been one of the best DPS in contenders recently. Speaking of contenders, it's worth noting that Saudi Arabia are mostly made of Twisted Minds, aka the top EU contenders team for multiple tournaments running. They're proven, and the synergy is there, and they're always a very weird team to prepare for on top of it, just knowing how much they love to run strange tanks, plus the Pharah and Echo comps. They're a complete wild card. It feels like their comp shouldn't be good, but they always make it work because of their practice. And if they catch you unprepared, you might as well pack your bags. So that's what Group D is looking like as a whole, and what you need to know about the countries. They're pretty interesting, right? I'll get to my thoughts and predictions once we get through all of the groups. For now, let's run through Group A. And there's two obvious favorites in this one. One is obviously Korea. They're the heart and the soul of Overwatch, and they have the best roster in this event without a doubt. You've got the 2022 Overwatch League champions plus Lip, and this dude is especially angry after the Reign choked in the playoffs. We might witness a scary revenge tour out of him and Korea. Combine that with one of the best backlines ever assembled, plus freaking Hanbin and Fearless, and there's just no way they're gonna get knocked out. Korea are the favorites to win it all, let alone get out of this group. The other lead favorite in the group is Finland. Finland had a surprise reign of dominance in the qualifiers, only dropping a single match to Saudi Arabia, and even that was a pretty close game, because as it turns out, Sana is actually pretty good at Overwatch. He may have sat on the bench in Overwatch League, but on Team Finland, he's an all-star. And behind him, he's got some great reinforcements. Vestola on the front line, and longtime vet Masa on support. Now, up until recently, LH Cloudy was also on the roster, but unfortunately, he got suspended for some recent things that he said on his stream, and he will not be traveling with Finland to the World Cup. There's a possibility this could be a problem depending on the meta, but Finland, I think, should be able to persevere. If anything, if Cloudy is not there, it might motivate them even more to play well in his honor. Finland are super good. With how hard they rolled through EU, they shouldn't have much of a problem at all to get through this group, because outside of Korea, it's just two minor Americas teams. Colombia and Mexico are both super cool, but competitively, this group is a very bad drawing for them. Colombia was a pretty interesting team, as they ended up going undefeated in their group stage qualifiers. However, now they're without their key player, EQL, aka the big reason why people were excited to watch this country to begin with. Without this former Overwatch League pro leading the way, I don't really know if they have any chance of keeping up. Even with him, things were looking grim, so now Colombia, they're more just happy to be there. Meanwhile, with Mexico, they notably made it out of a group alongside Canada and the US. Their coaching is good overall, and they looked okay, but their team is full of people you just haven't heard of, and against two juggernauts in a country with at least some experience, that doesn't exactly bode well. They're very fortunate that their group had 3 slots to begin with, because I mean, if they could barely even defeat Puerto Rico, then the odds are heavily stacked against them in this situation, and they're going to be some big-time underdogs. In Group B, we have a fairly interesting mix of countries, a good balance of respectable players. The clear-cut frontrunner has gotta be Great Britain. They ran through their EU qualifiers, losing just a single game along the way to a respectable Denmark team. This team is filled to the brim with high-end EU talent, and it just might be their best roster to date. Kai might have had a down year for the Gladiators this season, but the World Cup's competition is a bit lower, and he is very skilled, so I expect to see him return to form. And with guys like Jakaru, Funny Astro, and Backbone backing him up, with London's head coach there to reassure him, yeah. Great Britain are not to be trifled with. The one thing I have to say with Great Britain, though, is there's an interesting dilemma that may affect them at some point. The Backbone situation. In the qualifiers, he was their starting flex support. Now, to be fair, the Boneback support isn't bad at all, but it's not exactly his natural position. It's a similar situation to the US backline, where a real team might be able to punish something like this. Now, here in this specific group, I think they should be okay, but it's something to consider moving forward. Great Britain are good, but they may come with some potential flaws. The question is, can any other team in this group capitalize? Well, maybe Canada have something to say about it. They aren't in their prime silver and bronze medal form, but this new wave of Canadian talent will not be going down easily. Seeker and Crimzo makes for a mean 1-2 punch. They're two of the most underappreciated Western talents this game has to offer. Try and remember, this is not Crimzo's first rodeo, and that he's a really solid support player, and then Seeker has shown the last few years that he can embrace a carry role. And on a Canadian team that might actually be better than the Valiant team he was on, his skills really might take off. And while they aren't exactly premier talents, Cal, False, and Magic 8-Ball are some good reinforcement. We didn't get a great look at what Canada can seriously do, but this team has a lot of potential, and I would not be surprised if they make some serious noise in the group. Should we be sleeping on Australia and Brazil, though? We'll have to see. They take on more of an underdog role in this thing, but the talent and the history would suggest they're still a threat. Australia is literally just a mix of the top Aussie contenders teams on one roster. Kuffa is also a really good tank, and you might just get the best of some of your favorite players. This Australia team went undefeated in their qualifiers, and I think they're maybe a little underrated. The only thing that scares me though is their best player, Punk, dropped out to let Kuffa have the opportunity, and without that key carry and leadership figure from the Overwatch League, I fear that Australia may not have the playmakers to keep up. It's going to be on the new wave to prove us wrong, and while they focus on the new, Brazil is focusing on the tried and true. Brazil is a bit of an unknown in this thing. The team they have is amongst some of the most respected players to have ever graced the South American scene. Basically, all these guys were on a team together at some point. Some have actually come out of retirement recently as well. Brazil have that reliable synergy, and they're not exactly facing any pressure. And since they've had more time to warm up and play the game again, they might just surprise you. But much like Australia, it's going to be a difficult road. Some of their guys are a bit past their primes at this point, and they may not have the star power to get that top 2 finish, especially when they couldn't even take a map off Colombia, who aren't being rated that highly. Brazil most certainly have something to prove. It's been a long time since they've competed, and I'd love to see what they're made of. And then there's Group C, which I also find rather interesting. One spot we know is an insta-lock. One spot is definitely going to China no matter what, as they're arguably the second best team overall in the World Cup. It is literally the Hangzhou Spark plus Farway. It's a super team, even by Overwatch League standards. And in the World Cup, where the competition just isn't as great, yeah, you kind of get the idea. Although there might be some cause for concern with China later on, because Guxue is going to be their one and only tank. He's shown that he's not just a Winston one-trick, but thanks to 20 dropping out recently, it's going to be on him to play whatever the team needs him to. And will he be able to get away with only running his comfort picks? I'm not so sure about that. Maybe there's a possibility that'll keep them from getting the gold, or at the very least getting upset by some other team along the way. But who's the most likely to join them out of this group? Well, right off the bat, probably not Hong Kong. It was cool of them to make it here, but they definitely benefited from having a 3-slot group. Their roster is just an okay mix of Pacific players, but not to the extent of like Japan or Thailand. They mostly went unchallenged against bottom feeders to get here, and against the big guns that simply will not fly. The two teams that may take flight, though, are Thailand and Spain. As mentioned a few moments ago, Thailand's got quite a few Asia-Pacific champions. In fact, their entire roster, for the most part, quite literally just clutched out a Fall Series Contenders Championship this month. They're well practiced, and they showed they were even a match for the likes of Australia. Thailand are a seriously underrated team, and if they could get by Spain, they just might make a surprising run to the top 8. Which gets us now to Spain themselves. Spain are without a doubt the most interesting story coming into BlizzCon. Nobody was banking on these guys getting out of a ridiculously stacked EU qualifier. There was at least 5 teams that I had ahead of them in that qualifier, and they managed to get second place in their group. They pulled off upset after upset and showed some incredible teamwork and resilience along the way. I mean, they beat France and Denmark, 2 stacked teams filled to the brim with former and current Overwatch League players, while Spain themselves are mostly a group of unheard-ofs. They are the Cinderella team of BlizzCon. The idea of them continuing the miracle run is not far-fetched. This team doesn't rely on just 1 or 2 players. They are anything but one-dimensional. Everybody can be the main problem. They've shown it. they all had their moments. At the helm, you have a relatively known tank player like Helv, who's made play after play for them. And don't forget about the unsung heroes in that backline, Kanale and Gala, who literally made some game-saving plays. I'm a big fan of the well-rounded nature of Spain. Even if you have more talent than them, they find ways to outwork you. Although, there could be some issues with Spain heading into BlizzCon. You see, both their starting DPS from the qualifiers are no longer on the team, and both of them played an integral role in their success during this time. Making up for their skills won't be easy, and you have to wonder if Spain are prepared or not. Something like this could keep them out of making that miracle run or even getting ahead of the likes of Thailand. Although, at the end of the day, based off of what we've seen so far, if anyone can overcome the odds, it's probably Spain. That second place spot in Group C is going to be an interesting race. So that is a little preview and short analysis of the groups and the 16 countries competing. Here is my quote-unquote armchair analyst expectations and predictions. In Group A, Korea go number 1, with Finland very easily taking the 2 slot. Mexico and Colombia's rosters just aren't up to par. In Group B, I like Great Britain number 1 and Canada number 2. GB, I think, make it out very easily, and I do believe that Canada just have a bit more talent than Australia. In Group C, I'm going China number 1 and the continuation of the Spain miracle run at number 2. The narrative is way too cool for their story to end so soon, and despite the DPS concerns, I really do like how Spain plays as a team, and I just feel like they want this more than anybody else. And finally, in Group D, I'm picking the United States at number 1 and Saudi Arabia claiming the 2 seed. This group is the hardest to get a grasp on. It would be really funny if the US ended up not making it through, but they seem a little too good to be getting thrown out this early. Just too many OWL players, you know? The other one, though, that could be more interesting. I feel like Saudi Arabia and France are both good options, but I am a firm believer that it is Saudi Arabia's time to shine. Their roster's been the best EU contenders team for a while, and I think their comp choices just tend to be better than what France likes to play, and their roster is also a bit more exciting and a bit less washed. Either way, Group D should lead to some fireworks, as there's a lot of big countries and big fan bases over there. Prepare for a toxic wasteland. In terms of what I think will happen in the finals in the Group of 8, I don't really think it matters what happens beforehand in these groups or what the seeding looks like. Korea should be winning this one no matter what. They're just so unbelievably stacked. Too stacked. And after settling for bronze the last World Cup, you already know that they're out for some serious blood. If not, just knowing how good the Spark were in the playoffs, it would probably go to China. They're like my leader to be the runner-up. Honestly, they're like the only country that even stands a chance of dethroning Korea. Those two are like my first and second no matter what. For third, I'm going to keep it super basic and say the US. I think of the remaining teams, they feel like the best overall, but they do tend to be very cursed in the World Cup. They've only ever had one good result, so it wouldn't necessarily be a shocker if they go out a lot earlier. And here's a look at what my bracket would look like if my groups came true, or kind of just in general, I guess. Again, Korea number 1 for sure, China number 2, then I think that US and the UK will be fighting for the bronze. I don't know if I expect any serious upsets, maybe outside of China taking on the gold or the US getting knocked out early, but hey, anything is possible. I can sit here and tell you what I think all day long, but I don't know the future, and neither do you. So let's just sit back, relax, and enjoy the World Cup again. It has been far too long. Time to watch the game we all know and love and band together. Hope all of you guys enjoy, and if this is your first World Cup, I hope it is as magical as the first one that I saw all those years ago in 2017 as a boomer. Have yourselves a good one. Peace.